second here. Well, thank you, and I want to thank all our veterans and their families. Let me see if I can move this thing up a little.
Speak up.
I think I'll be better off this way. I'll put it right up to my mouth, if it doesn't fall. Boy, sure acting like it. All right, we'll give it the best shot. Anyway, good morning. Boy, it sure is a pleasure to be here. Isn't this a beautiful day?
Yes.
Ah, it's a beautiful day. Could not. I want to take a few moments, recognize the women who have served this great country. And today we remember the nation's rich history of noble achievement for our nation's veteran women. This year, for example, women will celebrate their 95th year in the Marine Corps. We also remember a woman's many firsts. Brigadier General Margaret Brewer, the first woman to be promoted to a Marine Corps Brigadier General, who passed away earlier this year. Department of Veteran Affairs launched a call center designed only to receive and respond to questions from women veterans, their families, and their caregivers. The history book tells us great stories about women warriors. Unfortunately, in modern times and in the history of this nation, the sacrifices and services of women have not been adequately recognized. In the American Civil War, women were rumored to cross-dress in order to fight for their cause. And in 150 years, since, of course, this is Nevada's 150th year, having joined this great union, women have dedicated their lives to serve this country. From World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf War, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and all the conflicts in between, American women have been making their sacrifices to preserve the liberties and freedoms that we enjoy today. And so, it's incumbent on elected officials serving in Washington, D.C. to ensure that these veterans receive the benefits they have earned and deserve. Right now, women compose 15% of the homecoming U.S. troops and 15% of the U.S. Armed Forces. These brave service members are coming home to an economy that's still struggling to get back on track. As a result, too many of these women are looking for work. Right now, the unemployment rate among 9/11 female veterans has reached 20%. Furthermore, any woman returned home to a VA system that they feel is not ready to meet their needs, too many of our female veterans worry that there are not enough female health professionals in the VA system, or that the facility itself cannot properly accommodate them. I believe that meeting the needs of our veterans, including our female veterans, is a goal shared by both parties in Washington, D.C. Your Nevada delegation in Congress, the head of the Department of Veterans Affairs, President Obama, all believe in the contributions of our female veterans and the need to serve them once they return to civil life. But of course, much more still needs to be done. I want to assure you, your concerns are being heard. Earlier this week, I led a telephone town hall in which nearly 40,000 Nevadans were on the line to talk about the issues of the day. There may have been a few out here in the crowd that may have been on that particular town hall meeting. But I did call Nye County, as a matter of fact. Some of you may have been on that call. I received questions from veterans, women and men, who were at a loss at how to secure certain benefits. And that is simply unacceptable. According to statistics provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs, the number of women using VA health care has more than doubled since the year 2000. Women, as I said earlier, make up 50% of the active duty service members and as much as 19% of our National Guard Reserve Service members. Based on this trend, the number of women veterans and female VA users is expected to double within the next decade. But despite this dramatic increase, the VA has reported that women constitute only 6% of their total patient population. So from these figures, it seems as if women may not be using the resources that they have available to them. The reason may vary, but my guess is they're not availing themselves to these services because they simply do not know what services are available, or they do not feel comfortable utilizing them. While more must always be done to help our nation's veterans, I would like to share with you briefly what my colleagues and I have been working on in Washington, D.C. to help veterans here at home. As a member of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, I am fortunate to be able to work on veterans issues on a daily basis. During my time on the committee, I have found that common sense often leads the way to tackle the tough issues we're facing, especially those of women veterans. For example, under current law, the VA grants per diem programs does not reimburse VA-funded facilities for services provided to homeless veterans' dependents. As a result, children accompanying their veteran parents who has fallen on hard times can be turned away from receiving care at the VA-funded facilities. And I've heard personally from individuals whose families have been hurt by this policy. One story that stands out in my mind is the difficulty of an Air Force veteran who recently wrote to me. She told me that because of this policy, she was forced to leave a child behind across the country while she sought work in Nevada. Our veterans shouldn't be forced to face those choices as to whether or not to keep their families together. But I'm very glad. I thought that was mine. I thought my talking was warming it up. But I'm very glad to share with you today that just last week, the Senate passed legislation to address this very problem. I partnered with Democratic Senator from Washington, Patricia Murray, to author the Care for Veterans Dependent Act. This bill ensures that VA-funded facilities can be reimbursed for care provided to homeless veterans' dependents. And I will continue to push for the law to pass the House of Representatives so that it can be signed into law by the President of the United States. Another common sense measure is to ensure that women seeking care at veterans' facilities feel comfortable and have the privacy that they need. In March, I introduced a measure that required the VA to give women veterans access to safety and privacy when using the Department of Veterans Affairs facilities. As the demographics of our armed forces are changing, we must ensure that the VA is able to meet them. Women simply must be comfortable in the clinics and hospitals in which they're supposed to receive their care. Providing for health care and families of our female veterans are only two pieces of the puzzle. It also is incumbent on Congress to make sure that the women and men who are returning from the battlefield are returning to gainful employment. So here in Nevada, about 13.2% of the veteran population, men and women combined, is unemployed. And as I mentioned previously, as many as 1 in 5 post 9/11 women veterans are looking for jobs. There is a common sense fix that will address this issue also. Right now, veterans who have been trained in our military, the greatest military in the world, cannot use their skills as civilians. For example, a service member who drives a truck in the Army for 10, 20 years can't just leave the service and get a job as a truck driver. Instead, he or she has to go through even more training to get the right certification. Another example is combat medics. Combat medics cannot get good paying jobs in the civilian world. These are men and women who know how to reinflate a lung, care for shredded limbs. Their valuable skills do not help them find a job. Instead, they must endure more tests and more training and more credentialing. Shouldn't our military men and women be more valuable because of their service? Right now, there's common sense legislation pending in the Senate, the United States Senate, to address this problem. And I look forward to continuing to push that specific bill to help Nevada's veterans. There are, of course, many other issues that must be addressed. The crippling of backlog to benefit claims is one major example. Brain trauma, mental health issues are also very pressing problems. And while we work through the bureaucratic process in Washington, D.C., it is important that my colleagues and I remember that what we're doing there is having a very real impact on the people right here in Pahrump. Former President John F. Kennedy said during a 1963 address, As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. This statement rings particularly true in light of our veterans. Considering the sacrifices that our service women, men, and families have made to ensure prosperity and security in this nation, they deserve nothing but hard work from their representatives in Washington, D.C. So thank you again. Thank you for allowing me to be with you today. Have a wonderful Veterans Day weekend. We can't ask for better weather. Thank you so much for being here today. Thanks to the veterans, and thank you to all the families. What happened to my drink?
Stay tuned for continuing coverage of the Women's Veterans Recognition Day event.